This webinar is hosted by the Canadian Institute for Cybersecurity at the University of New Brunswick. Today's presenter is Chris Lincoln. Chris leads Bell Security Professional Services in Atlantic Canada and serves as the principal consultant for the National Security Integration Practice. He specializes in governance, risk and compliance, and technical testing, and has over 20 years' experience in IT and security. Today, Chris will be presenting on information security management frameworks.
Very good. All right. Then thank you. And thank you, everyone, for joining today. I do have a lot of content, and I hope to present it in a manner that that you can understand and maybe take something away in your understanding of information security management frameworks and what they can do for you and potentially some of the pitfalls that you may run into. Whenever I do talk about security, I tend to speak sort of quickly. So if I get too excited, then Mary Jo, please let me know, and I will try to slow down. So the outline of what we'll go over today is why would you use an information security framework? We'll talk about some of the major frameworks there and give you some ideas on selecting frameworks that may work for your organization. So first of all, frameworks will allow you to help you in different areas of your maturity, they'll help you out in at different levels of maturity in your roadmap for moving your organization into a secure and environment in a level that is comfortable for you, where you can bring the level of risk down to an acceptable level for you, for the board, for management, and they'll help you to understand and give sort of a critical look they'll give you a critical look into what it is that you're doing well and what it is that you may not have been paying attention to. So it'll give you a comprehensive view of your security operations and how you can manage things. And then the eternal question is always, how much should I do? Because you can put as much effort into security as you like, and it will help you in deciding what should you do and what is it that maybe you don't need to spend as much time on. Common goals of the frameworks here that you'll see across many of the different frameworks is that you need to understand what it is that you're protecting, what assets you have. And that's a term that's used in a lot of frameworks is assets or information assets. What is it that you're going to protect, and how important is that if you lose control over those assets? So understanding the impact if it's compromised. And although I use the term here compromised, it could be any of a number of impacts. Unauthorized disclosure, misuse of assets, could be alteration or even destruction of the assets, meaning that it's being removed and you can't restore it. And then it will give you and all of them, the goal is, what do we do in terms of protecting the information assets? And then once you have it in place, that's not the end goal. Getting to a certain level of maturity is good, but you need to ensure that you have ongoing maintenance of the security program so that it's essentially a self-healing process. And you operationalize your security, and because managing security is very much a do sort of thing. It's not, you can't buy technology, and that's your silver bullet for everything. it's very much a due process. So these are the major frameworks that I would like to go over today. Some of these you may have heard of, seen, or maybe some of your organizations are already involved in these. And in many cases, organizations that have compliance obligations are using multiple frameworks here. For example, at Bell, we have at least 7 areas of our operations certified in ISO 27001. And because we take credit card payments, we are required to comply to PCI DSS, just as an example there. I'm not including what is known as SOC 2 reports, previously known as SAS 70 or SSAE 16. It's now SSAE 18, not including SOX as well. These aren't comprehensive frameworks that you can use for building an information security program around, although they are useful tools for programs. It's not something that you necessarily want to build things around. And privacy frameworks I'm omitting simply as a matter of time, in that it's a little bit of a different beast, and something that would require more time than we have available to cover what we have here. So, without further ado, I'd like to go into the ISO 27000 family. This is a family of information standards, the oldest and most popular one. So it has been around since, in one form or another, since 1985. And many thousands of entities have certified against ISO 27001. Now, although we talk a lot about ISO 27001, the ISO 27000 family does include a large number of different tools that you can use for implementing and maintaining an information security management program. And for example, ISO 27005 lays out a framework for running a risk assessment, which is part of what you need to be doing to understand what is the level of security that you need to have in your organization to address the information assets correctly, and what is it that you need to focus on. There are certain areas of your organization that, if they can be properly segregated from the areas where your most sensitive information is managed, don't necessarily need to be managed to the same level of the same level as the main most sensitive information, which we often call the crown jewels. ISO 27001 includes 114 controls, so it's fairly comprehensive. And here, when we say controls, and this is again common in information security management frameworks, that a control or control measure is an activity used to reduce the likelihood and/or impact of a particular risk or threat. And to obtain the standard, it is unfortunately not free, but the price has come down a lot. It used to be about $400, and it's now available for about $33. So one of the next most popular is the NIST 800 series, or SP 800 series. NIST being the National Institute of Standards and Technology, which originally was created so that the U.S. government could maintain different standards for various operations, and includes standards for technology use for many things outside of IT security as well. But the 800 series here is really considered the gold standard. And one of the most famous there is, and most referenced, is NIST SP 800-175B, which was different numbers previously. As each of these is updated, it somewhat maddeningly gets new numbers. But this one refers to encryption. And so when we talk about industry accepted encryption standards, usually we're talking about NIST. And NIST has plenty of standards, as you can see over on the right side here, where you can use for understanding how a specific domain of information security management should be implemented. And this is very often a standard that can be used for a government level. And so most of the NIST publications don't really consider small and medium enterprises, and they do consider sort of the maximum security levels. But they are very useful as a reference for anyone who is looking for what are best practices in implementing contingency planning, for example, or incident response. And you can always go to these NIST controls, which are NIST standards, which are free and available for you to take a look at and refer to. NIST SP 800-53 is an assessment framework that you can use, being security and privacy controls for information systems and organizations. So very often when you say we use the NIST framework for building our program around, they're talking about 800-53 here. And when we look at the full set of controls, when I say that this is a comprehensive system of information here, as you can see, second bullet from the bottom on the left, that there are over 9,000 different controls for the entire series in 800, and over 1,500 for just 800-53. So it is something that if you're a small or medium sized organization, it's probably going to be a bit much for you, but it is very good as a reference for how things should be done and in terms of best practices. The three levels of controls that I talk about here, this is based on the impact of the systems, the impact of, or rather the sensitivity of the information. And so it includes three levels of controls that you can use to base your organization around. If you're able to put things into high sensitivity zones and low sensitivity zones, then that means that things are, you don't necessarily have to manage everything according to the high sensitivity standards, which make things a little bit easier for you to manage. Continuing on the government theme, ITSG-33, issued by CSE, is the standard for the federal government here in Canada. And this was issued and finalized by CSE in 2012. And over on the right here gives an overview of how ITSG-33 works. This is really a set of controls for Canadian government departments and suppliers to the government. So if you have a contract with the government as a service provider or other supplier relationship, then you are expected to be compliant with ITSG in the areas related to the service that you are offering. And of course, this is something that we need to manage for at Bell for our own government contracts. One of the nice things that they have here is that there are different profiles within this that you can use that have a specific set of security controls so that you can understand specifically the needs that is required if, for the type of, or rather sensitivity of the information that you are working with, whether that's protected A, protected B, or secret. And so it's an overall life cycle approach to security risk management. It says 636 controls here, and it is freely available on the Government of Canada website. Another NIST Cybersecurity Framework. This is based on SP 853, and it is one that is more simplified, and the idea behind this is that critical infrastructure, being your lifelines, your lifeline providers, such as electricity, heat, all of that. These organizations should not necessarily have to sift through very difficult and long and complex documents that, as you see, over 1,500 controls in the main SP 853 framework. This boils it down to 108 controls, which makes it much more manageable. And it categorizes the controls into these 5 areas here. And this, again, does focus very much on security as something that you do. So you can categorize the controls into, or rather, the controls are categorized into identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover here. So identify what it is that you need to be protecting, which for critical infrastructure is pretty easy, and then identifying threats within the network, and then protecting those assets as well. And so detecting the threats, responding to threats that are detected, and then recovering from any incidents that you may have. So as it mentions here, it does assume that the target assets are known, so it doesn't start off with a risk assessment, which makes it much easier and very speedy for organizations to get up and start moving towards. Now, although this was designed for protecting critical infrastructure, this is very good for small and medium-sized businesses or any organization that is starting out on their roadmap toward security maturity to use as a simplified set of controls. These are the things that you really should be doing in information security, and it provides you with an easy reporting structure to senior management where you can say that we are 85% capable in the protect area, and we have another 15% to go. And you can talk about the roadmap there. And this has been updated a few times. The latest version was a 2018 draft that was issued in April. Next is the CIS Controls. This was previously known as the SANS Top 20 Critical Security Controls, and this is one that is a little bit different from the others that we've talked about so far, in that it's much more technology focused as opposed to this is what you should be doing, although there is still a lot of operational procedures that need to be put in place around the different parts of the framework, as you can see on the right side. And the idea here is that the designers here were concerned that in the other frameworks, you'd start with a risk assessment, and that would take time for you to conduct that risk assessment, and you're not really getting by the time the risk assessment has been done, you're not any secure. You know where your information is, and you know you have a plan for how to secure it, but you haven't actually made anything more secure at that point. Whereas these are as CIS and SANS have said, these are ways that if you implement these procedures in these technologies, these controls, then this just for the first 6, you should be able to prevent 85% of all attacks. Now, this is not as easy as it may sound, though. For example, CIS Control number 2, Inventory and Control of Software Assets, includes such things as application whitelisting, which means that that not only, 3 parts of that: application whitelisting of libraries, and application whitelisting of scripts. So that requires an entire inventory of all of the software that you have in your organization and strict control over every endpoint and server that you have in the environment, so that only what has been approved is usable, and anything else is blocked. So it's not necessarily for all organizations, but if you do have a high need for security, then these have been proven to work. And so, as I mentioned, the idea is to start doing things right away, as opposed to doing a risk assessment. Usually, places that are implementing this know that they have something that they need to do. They need to take action soon, and so they start moving on this. One thing I should mention is that this is updated every year or two, and the order of the 20 controls does change every year, depending on the importance and the order that you should be implementing them. So, and it does help in that there are basic foundational and organizational sets. So you can work with the framework to reduce the number of controls if you don't have a high need for very strict security. But application whitelisting is considered one of the foundational parts. COBIT. So COBIT has been maintained by SACA, an information security, used to be known as Information Systems Audit and Control Association, is now known just by SACA. And this is primarily used in the financial industry, although it's used for many other regulated industries. It includes such things as Risk IT, which is a risk management framework, and Val IT, which shows value creation of the IT organization, and has, as you can see here, over 1,000 activities that can be used to provide for proper governance of enterprise IT. So it's not strictly security, but it does include a security part of this. And if you're not a member of SACA, then this framework is $90. And if you are a member, then I believe that's discounted to about $60. And it does give you an idea of what it is that you need to do to provide assurance to, again, senior management that there is proper governance available for information security assurance and for risk. The latest version of this was released in 2012. This one I won't spend too much time on because there are several limitations to this, but I have worked with some organizations that like to use this in conjunction with other frameworks. This is the Lockheed Martin cyber kill chain. and it's based on military defense techniques in that it's focused specifically on preventing internal attacks. So if you're looking at APTs or advanced persistent threats as a threat to your organization, then this is the sort of thing that you can do, and it provides a set of different activities that you can do to disrupt that attack in getting into your organization, spreading within your organization, and then extracting information from your organization. As I say here, it is limited in scope in that it is specifically dealing with external threats, and it's not really addressing internal threats or internal information management so much as preventing intrusions. But it has been proven to be effective if done properly against this particular threat. Industry standards, which don't necessarily apply if you're not in this industry, but many of these are useful and important to be aware of. One of the industry standards that goes across different industries is the PCI DSS, which applies to any organization that stores, transmits, or processes payment cards, being credit cards or debit cards, or issuing credit cards as well. If you're involved in that at any point, or if you are a service provider to an organization that does this, then it's very likely that you will need to, or you will be asked to demonstrate compliance with this. And as a service provider, I mean that, for example, as a data center company, even though you may not have access to the end provider's data and their systems, by the fact of hosting the networks, you're responsible for some of the controls, such as physical security of the systems that are hosted within that environment. And so a lot of data center companies, cloud companies, are responsible for being PCI compliant, even though they're not handling specifically payment cards. They're providing the platform for that. OSFI for the financial services industry, and if you're in this industry, then you know this because the regulators already come to you to talk about that. Same goes for NERC CIP. So this is talking specifically within New Brunswick. That would be NB Power, and so it's any organizations that are part of the North American, being U.S. and Canada. And I'm not sure, I don't believe that Mexico is part of this, but it does apply to Canada and the U.S. If you are part of the energy generation, then you're required to comply to this system. And these are all freely available online. There's also ISA IEC 62443. This one is similar to ISO 27000 in that it's something that is not necessarily required of an organization, but an organization that has industrial communications, so industrial control systems, may opt to use this framework for their OT network. For cloud service providers, there is the Cloud Security Alliance Cloud Controls Matrix, and this is used often as to show your customers as that you have implemented industry-accepted controls for the service that you are providing. So getting into the bonus section here, Cyber Essentials Canada. This is something that is maintained by CyberNB here in Fredericton. It's based on the UK Cyber Essentials system. So this is the difference is that this is Cyber Essentials Canada. And it is a set of 35 controls. So this is the smallest one that we've talked about so far. And it's really the bare minimum that any organization should be implementing. And it's targeted towards small and medium-sized businesses, and it's a fairly low-cost certification program. So again, as if you are a small and medium-sized service provider, this is the sort of thing that you can use to give some assurance to your customers that you have an agreed-upon level of minimum level of security, so that your clients can be assured of that. And doing these 35 things are said to prevent about 80% of common attacks. And I hear that this is going to be adopted by the federal government in 2019, so all government suppliers will need to have this in place in order to continue on as government suppliers, and that RFPs for government contracts are going to require this in the near future. The standard of good practice for information security. So this one is an interesting one in that the Information Security Forum started this in 1989, and the idea behind it is that they want to put all of the foregoing standards into a single framework so that it is as exhaustive and comprehensive as possible. So this is mainly geared towards larger organizations that have multiple compliance standards, whereas if you are following the standard of good practice, then you should be at least 90 to 95% compliant with any other frameworks that you would need to. So there are over 3,000 controls in this. There are thankfully 2 levels, fundamental and specialized, depending on how deep you want to get into it. But this is, again, even though I talk about it as something that might be overbearing, it is a very good reference standard to use. And there are many organizations that do use this to evaluate the security of their own systems. These are usually large multinationals, which, looking at the cost of the membership in order to get access to this, you can see that this is a multinational budget. But again, it is a good set of reference that is a little bit easier to understand and a little less dry than the NIST family of standards. And finally, Unified Compliance Framework. So this is an organization and a service that they offer that, and I'm showing you some of this here, that their goal is to identify every control that they can in international standards and regulations, in U.S. standards and regulations, and configuration standards, and assign each one of them a specific control ID, and then look for where these controls are shared across different frameworks. So if we look at the center where it says establish and maintain high-level operational roles and responsibilities, we can see just in this snippet that's common to ISO 27001, ISO 27002, ISO 31000, and that within the Latin American guidance that I haven't expanded here, there's one standard there, other European and African guidance therefore, etc. And then also PIPEDA here on the right, that there's a control shared across there. So for any organization that has multiple compliance obligations, this is a very useful tool in the road to compliance to these multiple standards, frameworks, and regulations, where you can implement one control one time, and rather than complying to one standard or another separately. So how would we go about selecting these frameworks? Well, so I've tried to categorize these here, where in the required section, if you need to comply to this, you probably already know, and you're getting pressure from somewhere to apply to it. I throw in FSMA in here, although I haven't talked about it. This is if you are a supplier to the U.S. government, where you would need to follow FSMA, which is based on SP 853. If you have a complex environment or you want comprehensive coverage, then the list that you see here will help you with those. And these are the larger frameworks with the greater numbers of controls. If you're looking to provide assurance in the market that you're doing the right thing, and you want to use that as a tool, as a service provider, then these 4 standards here in the upper right will allow you to get certified against those, and you then can use that in your marketing materials. For things that are easily explainable to the board and senior management, both the NIST Cybersecurity Framework and the Cyber Kill Chain are in an easy to explain process, nothing that's too complicated. And if you're looking to just do the right thing just because that's what you believe that you should be doing, and you're not necessarily getting external pressure to do it, first, good on you. I love it when organizations are doing the right thing to protect their data. And these 3 frameworks here, ISO 27000 family, the NIST Cybersecurity Framework, and Cyber Essentials, will help you start that out. So I hope I've given you some information that you might be able to use to familiarize yourself with some of these frameworks. And if you are interested in implementing one or more of these, then I hope that this was useful to you.